You're listening to the Spirits Blind Tasting Podcast with Johnny Michelson.
Hey guys, it's Johnny here from Spirits People. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode of the Spirits Blind Tasting Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to tasting fine spirits without the influence of brands and marketing. So we're hitting off 2020 with lightning speed, and we're entering here February with this episode coming out on February 6th. And this is actually the 10th episode of season 2 of the podcast. So yeah, I'm quite excited about how things are just moving really quick here. And I'm just having a lot of fun with the second season here. And for anyone joining, listening in at this point or watching now on YouTube, season 1 was separated out as a separate season because the format was slightly different. So if you want to check that out, feel free to check it out on your favorite podcast app. It is only available on audio, unfortunately. So if you are a video person and prefer video, it may not be for you. However, it's a very interesting approach, if you will. So season 1 has 20 plus episodes, and each episode has 2 spirits in it. So as of season 2, I decided just to do a single spirit for a couple of different reasons. The episodes started to become a little bit too long, to be honest, and I could see myself getting more and more into the details as I'm kind of learning about the spirits, learning about this WSET approach, and really just trying to unpick what is in the glass in these blind tastings. So yeah, I decided to cut it down to a single spirit, just to make sure that I keep the episodes below the 30-minute mark. That's the goal. It was kind of getting a little bit above that at the end there. So, however, still interesting. So yeah, if you want to check it out, go ahead and do so. And before I jump into this episode, that was a rant and a half, not a rant, a ramble. Sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place. That was a ramble. But before we go into this episode, I just wanted to, as always, thank my Patreon community. So patreon.com/spiritspeople. You can join me over there if you want to support the channel, support the podcast, the videos, and the live streams, and all the other stuff that I do here on Spirits People. And it will maintain this podcast advertisement free, which I'm very excited about. And just also be able to produce some additional content exclusively for the Patreon community, which I'm starting to get into now again here in 2020. I had a big boost towards the end of 2019 where I did a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, with a new job and some other stuff happening, I haven't been able to do as much. But the podcast for me is kind of the anchor that will just continue to roll. So week by week, you'll get an episode of blind tasting as the bare minimum, and then all the other stuff was kind of be layered on top of that. So yeah, thank you so much to the Patreon community for your continued support. And I think with that said, let's jump into this week's episode. I'll kick off with the appearance and the nose, and then jump over and do a little bit more of a tasting, come back with my tasting notes, and then finish off with a conclusion. So I think that's it. Let's cut the intro here, and I will see you in a bit. All right, we are ready with some nosing and appearance assessments here in the first segment. So I've poured this sample into my WSET tasting glass, which is a rather large cupita glass, if you will. It's kind of borderlining a small wine glass, white wine glass, or whatever you want to call it, but it does have a cupita shape, so it's just a little bit oversized, if you will. So I've decided to switch over to these glasses because these will be the glasses that I'll use when I do my WSET course, which I've mentioned before, but I'll just mention again briefly. I was meant to do here in February, but I've pushed it out to June because I've been a little bit too busy to actually focus enough on it to take it serious, and I do want to take it serious. So I've extended my study timeline until June, which means that I'll have enough time to just do the studies that's necessary to pass the course. And also, see, we can see here, I think let's just move into the appearance here first of all. I was trying to show it here on camera, so I'm a little bit frazzled here. So I was trying to show it here on camera. So just jumping in, it's a clear spirit, and the intensity is a medium gold. So a nice golden hue here, not overly deep in the intensity, so about a medium. And the suggested texture is also about a medium, maybe even a medium plus. It's quite oily actually, just kind of sits on the side of the glass here for a bit. So let's put it at a medium plus for now and see how it handles in the mouthfeel in comparison to that. So medium plus on the suggested texture. In terms of the nose, it's a clean nose. There's no kind of faulty aromas or anything like that on the aromas. And the intensity is a medium. And this is a strange one. So let me just say this before I jump in, because obviously as every episode goes, I kind of let it sit for a bit. So I've poured this about half an hour ago, maybe even a little bit longer, to be honest, today. So just been doing a little bit of prep work here. So I poured it and let it sit. And my wife do these little cards for me so that I can have a quick reveal to myself at the end. So yeah, just about, let's say 45 minutes. I did a quick nosing of it at the very beginning, and I will say that it was completely neutral. There was basically nothing coming out of the glass, which sometimes can be, well, a hint of, well, this could have been a vodka at that point, but then you look at the color, like a nice golden color, and like something just didn't make any sense. So I did let it sit for a little bit longer, and yeah, now it's just kind of like coming to life. So I did heat it up a little bit as well, let it breathe, and then put the little coin here on top of the glass after that, just to kind of give it a chance. And yeah, so at this point in time, now after 45 minutes, it's really come to life. It's still a very strange aroma profile, to me at least, and I'm having a little bit of a hard time placing this. I'll say that it's quite fruity and sweet overall, and there's a bunch of different things that I'm not getting, which is the odd bit, if you will. So in terms of the characteristics themselves, the first thing I get is kind of a clementine sensation, if you will. There's a little bit of fresh lemonade. There's some fresh lemon peel. There's a little bit of overripe pear as well. It has a little bit of a density, so like the sensation of an overripe pear that's overly sweet. There's a little bit of vanilla alongside that kind of note as well. There's some sultanas, and then there's maybe a little bit of a mint note there at the very back. But overall, that's pretty much it. And all of that is quite fruity, quite fresh, quite sweet. And then there's not really any spice notes or anything like that coming through. There's not really a lot of sensation in and around aging. So I'm not getting any kind of oak, or let's say for malt whiskeys, you tend to get a little bit of a hint of the type of cask that you're using. So yeah, I'm just a little bit confused, which you might be able to tell by my kind of introduction here to this episode. It was a little bit messy, and I think it's just been messing with my head, to be completely honest with you guys. I'm a little bit lost here, so which is a good thing, because like I quite enjoy being thrown off, if you will. That's the whole point of the podcast, is for me to learn something and obviously at the same time share it with you guys. So the fact that I'm a little bit lost here is probably a good thing. So I probably have to just learn how to deal with that while recording these episodes. So yeah, anyway, interesting enough. So yeah, very fruity, very sweet. A lack of different aspects of the aroma profile here in terms of me trying to guess what it is. So at this point, just from the nose, I have absolutely no idea. I will probably lean towards a whiskey, and this is probably just because I'm thinking that it doesn't really feel like anything else. And I'm just I'm going through all the different categories of types of spirits that this potentially can be. And obviously there's a lot of different categories out there, like big popular ones, but also rather small and unique and strange ones, if you will. And I just couldn't place it. So I'm thinking that maybe this is a whiskey, but it's probably just because it's out of my my range of knowledge. And this could be, let's say, a single grain or a blend of sorts that I'm just unfamiliar with. So anyway, that was kind of a longer spiel than I intended. So I think let's move on in terms of the ABV before we jump into the actual tasting of this. So I think the ABV on the nose, like the volume of the aroma characteristics, I think were pleasant. They were not overwhelming, so I don't think we're dealing with anything cask strength. I don't think it's a 40% either. So I'll bump it up a little bit from the 40% because I think it's at the lower end of the spectrum. So I'll say 45 at this point, just to kind of give it a needle on the map there. But yeah, obviously we'll have a look when we get to the palates. And I think with no further ado, I need to take a break, maybe leave the room for a bit, clear my head and come back before I do the tasting notes. So I think with that said, that's what I'll do. And yeah, I'll see you guys in a bit. All right, we are back with some tasting notes here for episode 10 of the podcast. And I think it's starting to make a little bit more sense, although still a very tricky one, and obviously I could be completely wrong here about everything, but I think I'm starting to pick up on a few things that I think will help me narrow down in terms of what's in the glass here. So let's jump straight into it. So starting with the sweetness level, so basically whether or not I think there's any sugar added to this, and I think this is a dry spirit. I don't think there's any sugar in this. I also think the intensity here on the palate is about a medium, maybe even a medium minus. I'll give it a medium because I think it has had a good time to open up and I feel like it's continued to grow. So I think it's probably around the medium for the intensity on the palate here. In terms of the texture, I think it's a little bit watery, it's a little thin. It is actually quite nice and silky though, so although it's thin, it has a good coating effect on the palate. In terms of the viscosity, so I know we talked about actually on the visual here, so the appearance in the glass, that it would be around a medium, maybe even a medium plus, but I think here when you get onto the palate, it is actually not as viscous as that. So I'll say, let's call it a medium as well. I would call it a medium minus, but I actually do think that it's probably around a medium. So smack in the middle there on the viscosity. So jumping into the aspect of the palate that I think is interesting. So now that I've tasted it over the course of maybe an hour to an hour plus here, I think I'm starting to get some cereal notes. There's also a little bit of bread notes in there, which is kind of that grain sensation, if you will. And the bread note can also, sometimes I don't know whether or not I would always say that a bread note would kind of link towards the finishing and some casks, but it could also be some fermentation aspects of this spirit here. So regardless of where it comes from, there's a little bit of a bread note here. So I think my initial direction here from just the nose, I think is maintained as that it is a whiskey of sorts, potentially a blend, and maybe even some it could be a single grain as well. But all could be revealed at the end and me being completely wrong. So I think let's just carry on with that. So I think besides the fact that I was getting a little bit of a cereal note and some bread hints here, everything else is pretty much a direct translation of what I was getting on the nose here. So clementine is still there, lemonade is still there, the lemon peel was coming through. So yeah, it was a pretty, almost like it just felt pretty reliable. That was my thought that I wrote down here. So it felt reliable in terms of that link between the nose and the palate. Although I wasn't generally overwhelmed, because although there is some notes actually coming through on the nose and there was a range of them, they were all kind of focused in one area, which was all quite just fruity and fresh and very sweet. So it didn't really produce any kind of variety on the aroma characteristics. And I'll say the same thing for the palate. It kind of maintained that kind of fruity, very sweet aspect of everything, really. So I will say that it comes across as quite simple when you don't necessarily think about those individual notes and you just kind of clear your head and smell and taste this. It actually comes across as quite monotone, if you will. So I think it will play and into the assessment. I think for me personally here, I think in terms of having that lack of complexity and lack of variety, I think is not necessarily giving this spirit too much of a quality level for this type of approach, at least. Maybe if you use other aspects or different approach, you would judge it differently. But I think just the lack of complexity and also just moving from these notes into the finish. So again, a very maybe medium minus on the finish, not very long, very simple, not very complex at all. It had a little bit of that clementine maybe lingering. I think the clementine is the thing that links everything together if you think about the whole journey from the nose into the palate and the finish. But besides that, it doesn't necessarily offer too much other stuff. So yeah, I think, what else did I write down here? So taste like it smells, not overly complex. That's pretty much what I wrote down. And yeah, it's just pretty straightforward altogether. A medium finish, maybe medium minus. And yeah, in terms of the ABV, I think, yeah, 45%, which was what I thought on the nose. I think that's pretty accurate, to be honest. I don't think it's 40% because it does have a little bit of a tingle. So normally at a 40%, I wouldn't get that. But again, this could be anything. And honestly, at this point, I'm just I'm just baffled. So yeah, I think I want to get to the reveal here as soon as possible, because my mind is racing like a crazy person. But anyway, let's see. Quality level, I'll say it, let's put it smack in the middle. I'll put it in the good category. I don't think it's very good or outstanding for that matter. I think it's good because it's non-offensive. It's not poorly made in my opinion based on this assessment here. I think it's well crafted, but I don't think it offers much complexity or anything that kind of would push it into a very good category even. It's just pretty straightforward. It's actually potentially something that a lot of people would enjoy if you're not necessarily a hardcore whiskey drinker, because it's not very sharp in any aspect. A lot of people that don't drink whiskey will say that a whiskey is very sharp, very alcoholic, which this one is absolutely not. It's soft, it's sweet, it's fruity. So I think something to be said for someone who doesn't necessarily enjoy whiskey as many of potentially you guys listening here would do. So something to bear in mind. In terms of the guess, I'll probably stick to, should I say blended or grain? Let's say blended. I'll say blended whiskey, and I think that's it. That's all I have. So with that said, I think let's actually just kill this section and jump into the reveal because there's not really much else I can say. I'm confused, I'm baffled, and I just need answers. So there's that. So see you in a bit. Alright guys, we are back with the reveal, and this is very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense now because this is actually not a, well, I guess it is a whiskey, but it's an infused whiskey. So it's the Compass Box Orangerie, I guess that's how it's pronounced. So this is an infused Scotch whiskey. So I believe it's a Highland. And they're saying here, I have a fact sheet up and running. I don't want to just be reading out from it, but it's basically they've chosen a sweeter side Highland whiskey and they've infused it with, I think, orange peels, some cashew roots, and some other stuff. So essentially, this could not be called a Scotch, although it's Scotch whiskey. So it's been infused, so obviously against the rules for Scotch in terms of a category, but it just makes a lot of sense to me now because this was just overly sweet. And I think obviously with the infusion of stuff, maybe that's where whatever age this is, I'm not sure how old this is, but I think you're just stripping away that kind of sensation of any kind of aging. The oak, there was no oak. And it's just, it was just very confusing, to be honest. And I'm just very happy that it wasn't just me having an off palate day, if you will. But anyway, I've tried it now. And in terms of where this comes from, this is, and I've forgotten about all of these samples that I had. So I basically have a whole stash of old samples from the Dram Team, which is a subscription service that will give you a small box of samples either every month or every quarter. You can get one-offs, you can get gift sets and stuff like that. I was at some point a monthly subscription member, and I just ended up having a ton of samples. So unfortunately right now I'm not a member, although I would definitely highly recommend, if you're into trying a bunch of different things, looking at something like the Dram Team. I know Vin from No Nonsense Whiskey is potentially a monthly member, I'm not sure, but he's definitely doing some reviews over on his channel on YouTube. So if you're interested in seeing more about those type of samples, you can check out his channel. And if I can, here on YouTube, I'll try to link to his channel up here. But anyway, so 40% actually. So this was interesting because I felt like it had a little bit more of a prickle on the palate here that would usually mean that it's higher than 40% for me personally. But again, this has been kind of tampered with, if you will. That someone has been infusing and adding some things that could have potentially given that sensation outside of just alcohol. So I don't know whether or not this kind of addition of infused orange and orange peel and all kinds of stuff can also generate this kind of sensation. So anyway, super interesting. I'm very happy to have tried this. Not necessarily my cup of tea. I definitely feel like there was something not right for this for me personally, but obviously try to stay as neutral as I can in terms of my preferences when I kind of just talk through my notes here. But very interesting. So the Dram Team, Compass Box Orangerie, or I guess that's how you say it, Orangerie, and that's it. Let's close it out. I think that's that's as much as I can say. I don't really have anything else for this particular spirit here, other than it was interesting. So there's that. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and feel free to subscribe on the podcast through your podcast app or watch here on YouTube. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I hope to see you guys next week. Peace out.